Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. We're broadcasting live from the White House on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. I want to thank the Honorable Cedric Richmond for giving us an opportunity to be in the White House so that we can let the Black press hear directly on the progress of the Biden-Harris administration. Cedric Richmond is the senior advisor to President Biden and director of the Office of Public Liaison. Congressman Richmond, thank you so much for joining the Black Press of America.
Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Chavis.
And I really would like to have our chair of our board. We have 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies all over the United States, Congressman Richmond. Karen Carter Richards is our distinguished chair of the NNPA. Karen, give the lead off and comments on Black Press to Congressman Richmond.
The Honorable Cedric Richmond, we would like to thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We'd also like to thank you for all that you've done for the Black press and all that you continue to do. We really appreciate this opportunity on behalf of myself, Dr. Chavis, and all of the publishers in NNPA.
No, you're very welcome. Let me just say this. One, I've been familiar with the NNPA for a very long time. Was elected 21 years, whatever it was. It feels like eternity. But I go back a long way with Data News Weekly in New Orleans, Louisiana Weekly, and all of those publications, New Orleans Tribune, that were and are so instrumental in making sure that unfiltered news gets to the people, especially the community. And so the work that you do is vitally important. And I enjoyed working with you all when I was in Congress, when so many organizations and so many people in government that spend so much money a year can find everybody that they want to advertise with, but NNPA and our Black press. And so it's been a long fight. We're not where we want to be, but we are certainly making progress. So thank you for that. And your leadership has been incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Knowing that we couldn't get all 230 to ask questions, we got publishers sending questions in advance, Congressman Richmond. The first comes from Molly Bell, who is the distinguished publisher of the Dallas Examiner, publisher and CEO. Her question is, what is the state and the status of two major voting rights bills currently in Congress for the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act? What is the Biden administration currently doing to push these bills, although we know we have some challenges in the Senate? We hear a lot about the infrastructure bill and the budget reconciliation, but the key to our democracy is voting rights. Can you just tell us how people are going to the polls in a few weeks in Virginia and other states? We're concerned about voting rights. Tell us what we can do to ensure voting rights. And she concludes, we need a federal voting rights bill to save our democracy.
I would just say that, one, you're absolutely right. We understand the importance of voting. I was in the Capitol on January 6th, so I know how close we came to a real coup in this country, a real insurrection. And then I'm from the South, and so we know the legislation that is popping up all across the country for voter suppression. We supported both the For the People Act and the John Lewis Act. We did it in the House, in which they both passed. They're both sitting in the Senate now. One distinction I would make is that when they got to the Senate, S1 did get 50 votes to proceed to debate, but it did not have the support of 50 Democratic senators on passage. And so the first order of business was to get all 50 Democratic senators to craft a piece of legislation that they could all support and get us to that 50 vote threshold. And that happened a few weeks ago. And Leader Schumer will now call a vote on that piece of legislation, which takes a little bit from both, but both President Obama and former Attorney General Holder have endorsed. I think Stacey Abrams endorsed it also as being uh, moving in the right direction. So we're going to have that vote, and we have a lot of conversations about voting rights legislation. We have a lot of conversations with members of Congress about it. I was actually in a meeting with the president, the vice president, and Leader Schumer and Leader Pelosi, where the president was vocally advocating for the passion. And so we're there. That we have to have that vote, and then we'll see where we go. The president has called for reforming the filibuster and going to a talking filibuster, which means that after 40 or 50 days, you would get a vote up or down on the legislation, which is ultimately what everybody wants, because with 50 votes, the vice president would be the tiebreaker. So that's where we are. We are pushing, but we're not stopping there. We're not letting the obstruction or the lack of ability to get there in Congress slow us down. And we don't know exactly where we are on the new Senate bill until they have the vote. But in the meantime, what we've done is we are going to fight it three-pronged approach. We're fighting it in the Justice Department. We doubled the size of the Voting Rights Division. We put both Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark over at Department of Justice. Both of them led legacy civil rights organizations. So we are continuing to file suit over unconstitutional laws passed around this country to suppress the vote. So that's how we're fighting them in the courts. We're fighting them in the halls of Congress. We have the For the People. We have the John Lewis Act. We have this new piece of legislation that we're supporting. We're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep doing the things that we need to try to get it done. But if anybody believes that we can just automatically get every Democratic senator to vote on issues that's important to us, I think that watching all of these things play out, people know that there are some challenges there. And then the last thing we're doing is we're meeting them on the street corner. And that's why we put 25 million out months and months ago. The vice president made the announcement so that we could organize and educate voters in advance. And we don't think that that is the solution. We think it's a three-pronged approach. We think it's belt and suspenders, but we're not going to wait on and put all of our eggs in one basket. We're going to continue to fight the best we can. So that's going to be in Congress, in the courts, and on the street corners. And so that's the latest update of all of those things. And by the way, we signed executive orders for every department to go figure out how they can make it easier and more accessible for people to vote. We filed suit. We've done a number of things, but you're right. The best and most immediate thing we can do is restore the Voting Rights Act and put in protections into law. And we are working on that.
Thank you very much. We have 5 regions in the NNPA. I talked to most of our regional presidents. This is about the infrastructure bill, Congressman Richmond. In the bill that was passed by the Senate, what provisions, to your knowledge, in the infrastructure bill, hopefully it will get passed, that will make sure that African American owned businesses are included in how the new infrastructure bill is implemented?
Well, let me start off with the importance of the infrastructure bill to start with, and that is making sure that people understand that we're going to remove lead pipes that deliver contaminated water to too many homes of color, 10 million homes, 400,000 schools and daycares with contaminated water coming in. So that's thing one. We're also going to invest in a number of things that will help with climate. And we know that these extreme weather events, especially if you look at hurricanes, are wreaking havoc on communities of color. Then the other thing is we are, it's our administration's position, formal position, that we're going to utilize small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, Black businesses as much as we possibly can, which is why we at the SBA will not rely on banks to just do the criteria and the lending. We're going to have direct lending through the SBA itself for loans under 150,000 for businesses. And we've doubled our goals. Well, we increased our goals by 50% in terms of DBE procurement. And so that 5% will equal $100 million over $100 billion over 5 years.
Very good. Can you comment about education? The commitment earlier today, we glad you briefed us on all of the support to HBCUs. But broadly speaking, the Children's Defense Fund cited a report earlier this year that the majority of children now in public schools, 18 and under across the United States, are children of color. Can you comment on where the Biden-Harris administration stands for equal high-quality education for all of the young people in school in America, but particularly coming from communities of color?
Well, I think that is something that flies under the radar far too often. The president talked about it on the campaign trail, and we talk about it in the White House, and our budget reflects it. That's why we're increasing funding to Title I schools. Those schools are in neighborhoods where they don't have the same tax base as other schools. And so therefore, with public school design in communities based off of property tax, it creates a system of school systems that have haves and have-nots. And what we're going to do is we're going to close that gap in terms of funding between the haves and the have-nots. We're going to make up the difference, and that is very important. The president said he wanted to triple the funding to Title I schools. I think we make a big down payment on that this year. And the other thing we're going to do to help is make sure that 3 and 4 year olds go to school for free, as opposed to just going to daycare. We want to make sure that in order to compete with the rest of the world now, our children need more than just 12 years of school. And we're going to make sure that we provide them with more. And so we're going to add 3 and 4 year olds. We're going to double down on Title I funding, and we're going to find other creative ways to make sure that we are supporting public schools around this country, because we know that 1, teachers need a raise, and 2, we know it's time to invest in our children. Finally put our money where our mouth is.
Very good. You know, a lot of our newspapers, Congressman Richmond, are second and third generation, owning property, owning housing. The Biden, under the Trump administration, African Americans lost more home ownership rather than increasing home ownership. What is the Biden-Harris administration commitment to helping get equality in housing? We know that Secretary Marshall Fudge is on the case, but can you just give us an overview of the commitment of Biden-Harris to ensure that African Americans can become homeowners, maintain their homes, and sort of reverse the gentrification that's going on across the United States, particularly in our urban areas?
Well, I was told where you kind of left off, and part of that is making sure that African Americans can stay in their homes during this recession that's the worst since the Great Depression. And we put in place programs and mechanisms to make sure that happened. The other thing we did, which was the first week in the administration, is we signed an executive order tasking Marshall Secretary Fudge at HUD on reviewing, analyzing all of the barriers to home ownership and all of the systemic racism in housing in the federal government, and creating programs and ways to start to dismantle that. So you will see that Secretary Fudge embarked on an extensive review of appraisals and other things that determine the worth of houses. The president has a goal to provide federal down payment assistance for people purchasing a home, first-time home buyers, which we think would specifically help communities of color and help people buy that first home. We know it's the best way to transfer wealth. And we know that we've been excluded from this part of the American dream through redlining and other areas, and we will continue to do that. But let me give you just a small example of what I believe is an administration that gets it compared to an administration that doesn't want to recognize it. So after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans and other Black communities had a hard time coming back because the government would not help if they didn't have clean title. And in our communities, we don't necessarily do successions each and every time. And then by the time it goes through a generation, you have so many owners in that property that it's almost impossible to get clean title. And that prohibited many people, mostly African Americans, from getting relief. So we've decided that we're not going to keep that policy, that if you can show possession, if you can show other things, we will give you assistance to help rebuild those homes. And that's just simply our effort to break down those barriers when we see them. And so that's why Secretary Fudge is going on a whole of HUD review to see where and what we need to do to continue to break it down.
Thank you. Councilman Richmond, every day, the Black press, we report more and more incidents of racially motivated police brutality. We were pleased that the House of Representatives passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The Senate didn't. Where do we go from here from the administration's perspective? I believe President Biden has given some instruction to the Department of Justice, but can you clear up so African Americans across the country and other communities of color are fearful now of, you would thought after George Floyd that there would be a downward trend in these police brutality cases, but so far every day we're getting reports from all across America, a steady incline in racially motivated police brutality.
Dr. Chavis, this is an important point. There are too many families and there are too many mothers or parents worried about an African American child, male or female,
Yes,
having an interaction with the police. And we supported and helped Senator Booker, Representative Bass, Senator Scott as they embarked on what we believe was good faith efforts to pass a comprehensive police reform bill in the name of George Floyd, one worthy of his name. And that process went on, and at some point it became obvious that the Senate Republicans wouldn't even go as far as Trump's executive order, that they were backtracking, not moving forward. And when that happened, the question was, do we continue to stay in that process, or do we act? Because there's several things that the president wanted to do that if he did it would have blown up negotiations and everybody would have blamed him for not getting it done. And so one common theme you're going to hear on this call is that where Congress won't act, we will. And so we immediately, DOJ immediately banned chokeholds and carotid holds. We reformed the use of no-knock warrants with all federal law enforcement. And so we're acting where we can act. And now we're embarking on the process of doing a comprehensive executive order, as we will do as much as we possibly can under the Constitution in terms of going at it alone with just the president's signature. Now, we're going to bring in, of course, mothers of the movement, families that have been affected by police brutality. We're going to bring in law enforcement. We're going to bring in local municipalities. We're going to bring in legal experts. We're going to bring in defense attorneys. We're going to bring in everybody and to get their thoughts, but then we're going to act. The one thing that this president is not afraid of doing is acting where he can with the executive orders. And we're going to still push Congress. We are not letting the Fraternal Order of Police or the police groups off the hook. We're not letting Republican members of Congress off the hook. We're going to continue to push for that legislation, but the things we can do on our own, the president's going to do on his own.
very good. And lastly, I know we're out of time. One last question from our publishers in the state of Virginia. the New Journal and Guide in Norfolk, the Richmond Free Press in Richmond, the Legacy Press also in Richmond, and the Washington Informer also reaches Northern Virginia. Uh, can you tell us, they say it's supposed to be a close election in a few weeks in Virginia, but what is the administration's outlook, not only in the importance of the Virginia election, but going into 2022, the importance again of GOTV, turnout of the black vote?
It's important to turn out the black vote. And I think what we have to remember is that voter suppression happens in several ways. One of which is what they're doing in the legislature to create barriers to voting, whether it's voter IDs or other measures. The other way is to use misinformation to persuade people that voting doesn't matter. And we're starting to see that more and more. So if you see the push on social media of the Biden administration cutting HBCUs $30 billion, which is just patently false, and PolitiFact and everybody else has debunked it as being false, but it's being pushed around, and it's being pushed around so that young African Americans and African Americans at HBCUs and people that went to HBCUs and care about HBCUs, that they get discouraged that, oh, there's no difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, or the Trump administration was better for HBCUs and black people than the Biden administration. That's just absolutely not true. So if you're talking about HBCU funding, it's usually $1 billion, less than $1 billion a year. And just this year alone, we've given HBCUs $4.2 billion. And so you see some HBCUs financially capable of forgiving student debt right now. You see a lot of them making investments into the campuses. And look, we still want to live up to our commitment of doubling, tripling their funding over the next 10 years so they can invest in the facilities. We're gonna do that. But there's been no administration ever to invest in HBCUs more than us. And on that note, let me just say that we don't have all day to tout all of the things that we've been able to accomplish in the first 275 days. But part of what I will say is that we have to show our voters, whatever constituency, but here we're talking about the black community, what we have done for them. And so whether it is promoting black maternal health, because our women die twice the rate of their white counterparts in childbirth, whether it is our equity we put in the pandemic response, whether it is banning the use of private prisons, whether it's telling our U.S. attorneys to stop charging the harshest the harshest sentence, charge the one that makes the most sense. We're reforming the racist disparities in sentencing. And for the first time, we are investing in community violence intervention programs, which we know that the best way to fight crime in our community is to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. And that is to use trusted interrupters to help resolve disputes, and to invest in after school programs, invest in recreation, invest in reentry, and support those coming home so that they can have a path to success. And when they do that, people in the community see it. And so those are all of the things that we're working on that people don't know about, that we have to do a better job of talking about. But all of those things were done with being intentional about investing in the African American community and making sure that African Americans get to chart their own future, whether you want to be a neuroscientist or whether you want to be a school teacher. Neither one matters to us as long as it's you fulfilling your destiny. And we want to make sure that we put enough investment out there that our children and our parents can make that decision. And for our seniors who gave blood, sweat, and tears so that we could go to some of the best schools in the world so that I can sit right here, we owe them the ability to live out their life with dignity and respect and comfort. And so that's why Medicaid expansion, Medicare expansion is important to us also.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Time has expired. Thank you so much Our chair and all of our brothers really appreciate this opportunity for you to speak directly to the Black press of America. And by doing that, you're speaking not only to all Americans, but particularly to our communities. We wish you well, Congressman Richmond. Please let the president and the vice president know that the Black press is here to serve, to advocate for freedom, justice, and equality, and also to help empower our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.